Hello, I'm Arcturox, or Arc, and I'm addicted to slime. I'm assuming because you clicked on this video, you want to learn how to play support Viscous. That's good. It's not that hard to be a good support Viscous. I'm not exactly like a top-tier, high-rank Viscous player. I'm, Ritualist 5, but, you know, the ranks, win rate, forget all of that, because you're not here because you crave victory. You're here because you crave slime. Double Cube Rescue Beam Support Viscous is one of the funniest builds in the game, and despite that, it's actually pretty good. The dopamine hit you get from double cubing your teammates under an enemy walker and 180ing a fight while everybody in voice chat says "atta girl" is something you can't really get anywhere else. So I'm going to run you through how to do that. And in order to make this desirable to YouTube, I'm going to break it down into a digestible 3-step process. Step 1. Relinquishing all earthly attachments. Now that might not sound like a good step 1 for playing a character in a video game, but listen, when you play support Viscous, your numbers are going to look like shit. You might not die very much, but you're not going to get a lot of kills, and you might not even get all the assists you deserve. Deadlock doesn't know when you double cube to counter a lash ult. If your Haze is almost dead and you rescue beam her and then she goes and gets a bunch of kills, you're probably not getting shit for that. So you need to leave the whole idea of deserving behind. All the numbers, all the wealth, all the metrics the game measures your worth with, they don't matter. Kills are nothing to you. To a certain extent, even souls are nothing to you. If you want to have fun being a support, it's gonna mean discarding those attachments. All that you need is Rescue Beam, Echo Shard, and an unshakable will. When the build really comes down to only those 2 items, you can often just insert those items into other builds and create a hybrid that fits the way you want to play. That's something to keep in mind later in this video when we discuss the build, because although I really like the build that I made, it might not fit your playstyle, and that's okay. I mean, fuck, I'm not even 100% sure that it's good. One of the other things you should leave behind when you play support Viscous is talking shit to your team. Yeah, your Haze just walked into the enemy walker and got murked. Yeah, your Lash just went in alone, solo ulted Abrams, and is now yelling at your Haze about the walker thing. That's all just gotta breeze by you. It's water under your bridge. At the end of the day, when you've chosen to take up the cube, it doesn't really matter how you feel about that Lash and Haze. When the Haze decides to run under the walker again, she gets a cube. When your Lash solo ults the Abrams, stealing 1/1000th of his health right as the rest of their team shows up, you rescue beam him out. The little ego inside of you that says, I should just leave them to die, you have to leave that behind. To die. In fact, the first thing you should do to be a better support Viscous right now is go into your settings, go to your ping wheel, and bind good job. Anytime someone on your team does anything noteworthy at all, slap that shit. Anytime someone thanks you for something, hit them with a "you're welcome." If your laning partner Vindicta hits a crisp snipe and hears this little freak say "good job," there's no way she's not feeling good about herself. And if you're comfortable on mic with strangers, gas them up yourself. Tell them they're gods at the game. It's free, there's no cooldown on it, and it will make your team play better. Okay, I'll assume you discarded your earthly attachments and experienced ego death. Great work. With that out of the way, we'll move on to step 2. Step 2. The tools of the trade. So this is my current build, Arc's fucked up slime ambulance. I've been using it for a while, editing it as I play, and I've really enjoyed it. I'm sure there's room for improvement. Again, I'm no Eternus player, but let me run you through what it's got going on. Most of this first row is pretty self-explanatory. The gun 500s, this one makes your bullets go faster, and this one sometimes heals you. Both of them give you bullet shield health. Mystic Burst is just a good pickup in general, and your damage is mostly in splatter, so this is definitely a must-get early on. Healing Right is an item that a lot of builds will put into an optional if you're losing lane category. But on this build, I buy it every game, even if I'm winning. You're not going to be doing a ton of damage, and one of the early strengths of this build is just its ability to out-sustain the enemy in lane. Healing Right helps a lot with that. Now onto the real shit. Rescue Beam. This is your first actual power spike, if you can call it that. It'll help you out-sustain the enemy even more than Healing Right, And this plus cube is basically a guaranteed out for you or your teammate if you need it. I'm gonna have a lot more to say about Rescue Beam in Step 3, but suffice to say it's very good. Improved cooldown here is just the first step on the path to getting your cube to be up as often as possible. Now here's where the first big variable comes in. You've got all these items over here in the floating early section. They're all very good and useful, and we will be buying them. However, at this point, you should be nearing the end of laning phase. So you might be moving between mid and a side lane, you might be helping your team pick up a kill or two, who knows. If you feel like you're really pulling in souls, just rush Echo Shard. If you don't have that kind of momentum, pick up these floating items first and then go for Echo. All of these are pretty self-explanatory. Cooldown reduction in Spirit Shield, Spirit Damage, and more stamina. So, Echo Shard. Echo Shard is your lifeline. It's your bread and butter, it's your one true love. Teammate dying? Hit the cube. Teammate still dying, Echo Cube. Between 2 cubes and a Rescue Beam, you can get allies out of a lot of situations they have no business surviving. It's so integral to this build that, despite it being a 6k, it's still sometimes worth rushing it early. It's really, really good. Superior cooldown, obviously you just put it on cube to make more cube. Extra charge is good, it gives you another punch, but I often sell it later for slots or forego it entirely for slots. You're going to have 2 punches already from putting 1 point into your punch fairly early, and you won't be using punch for damage anyway, since you generally save it for punch boosting yourself, punching allies in cubes, or punching enemies towards towers and stuff. Superior duration. You objectively should put this on ball, because even on ball, it increases the duration of cube, and being ball longer has way more value than keeping up the cube longer. However, I put it on cube because that's funny to me. Floating mid items. So improved spirit and improved burst are both just buffs to your damage. I often end up getting these a little late since damage is not my focus, even in mid game, but they're a huge help for both your splatter and your ball. You should also probably pick up the first tier of spirit or bullet armor somewhere in here. Healing booster buffs your healing, obviously, which you'll be doing a lot of. Mostly it's for the benefit of your Rescue Beam, since as we'll get into later, the healing is kinda the least important part of the cube. Now we get into the late game stuff. The situational things are all pretty self-explanatory. Torment Pulse is nice, especially if you're going heavier on the ball, since that means you're going to be next to the enemy a lot. Get bullet armor if the enemy has lots of bullet, and spirit armor if they have lots of spirit. Ethereal Shift is just great. It gives you even more survivability in fights and it can counter certain ults, but it takes up an active slot, so you should probably sell Healing Right for this. Rapid Recharge is good if you're more heavy on the movement and are going to be punch boosting a lot. This stuff in the late game section, other than Refresher, are all kinda situational also. You always want Refresher late game. It basically gives you 4 cubes and 2 balls in rapid succession. You can do extremely silly things with that. Diviner's Kevlar is another one of those items in here that's better if you're a baller. It obviously lends itself to ball tanking more, and can be extremely strong in making you a combined tank support. Spiritual Overflow. I mean, don't buy this. It does give cooldown reduction and spirit power, but it's also a 6k and you don't really need it. Only get it if you have too much money and you don't know what to do with it. Superior Stamina is definitely very good on you. It's just that you probably don't need that much stamina if you're good with your stamina management. It's still very good for late game movement regardless. And then way down here, where no one ever looks in this build, you have some optionals. Warpstone and Phantom Strike are both great if you want to lean heavier on ball. They really help with chaining ball stuns. The only thing is that they take up one of your precious active slots. I would probably replace Ethereal Shift with these. All your other actives are kinda too core to lose. You've got Rescue Beam, Echo Shard, and Refresher. You don't want to drop any of those. Pristine Emblem is another one of those gun items that are technically good on you, but also kind of a waste of money. Spirit Lifesteal is okay if you want to buy into higher spirit damage early and feel like you're going to get value out of that healing-wise, but I haven't had much luck with it. Alright, and that covers everything in the build, so we'll move on to Step 3. Step 3. Getting your medical degree. So the basics are pretty straightforward. You want to keep your allies from dying and you want to waste enemy abilities. Your primary tool for doing both of those things is Cube. Cube is what makes support Viscous worth playing, and I stand by the opinion that this is one of the best abilities in the entire game, ults included. It completely immunizes your allied target to all damage for several seconds. At max level, it cleanses every debuff in the game, and besides those things, it also heals your target for a good amount of health. When you're deciding when to throw your cube on someone, the biggest value you can get is from denying enemy abilities with long cooldowns. Stuff like ults from Moe and Krill, Lash, Wraith, or Dynamo. If you can get some clutch cubes off and waste any of those, your cube is up in 12 seconds. Their shit is down for like a minute and a half. The second biggest value you can get out of cube is saving your allies from other sources of damage and wasting any non-ult stuns like 7's Static Charge or Bebop's Hook. Ideally, you can time it to make the enemy waste their abilities on your allied target while they're safe in the cube, but it's better to keep your allies alive than it is to save cube for a high value ability. Again, it's up in 12 seconds anyway. Like I mentioned during the build section, the lowest value you can get out of your cube is using it for pure healing. After early laning phase, you should barely ever be using the cube for just the healing. The only time I'm using cube purely for healing is when I or a teammate are already out of the fight, and I just want to make sure they don't have to go all the way back to spawn for a re-up on the spawn juice or whatever. Another important cube point, you should be paying attention to certain allied ults as well. Everyone loves being saved by a cube, but if you accidentally cube an ulting Yamato or a Geist or something, you're probably gonna get called a slur. So if anyone on your team has an ult to save themselves, always make sure they've already used it. After that, they get low, cube away, go nuts, they'll love it. Also, some allies will have their ults interrupted by cube and some won't. There's no rhyme or reason to it, it just works on some people and doesn't on others. As a few examples, Lash will be fully interrupted by your cube, so unless he's inches from death, you don't want to cube him while he's ulting. Whereas Dynamo, only the damage gets interrupted, and cubing him mid-ult will keep him snug in the slime, so it's often a good idea to cube your Dynamo. Specifically if he's low and only got 1 or 2 of the enemies, because anyone else on the enemy team that hasn't been caught are going to try to focus him down as hard as possible. Infernus keeps the damage and his stun, but cube will definitely fuck with his approach, so be careful with that one. A lot of these same lessons can be applied to Rescue Beam. Use it to deny enemy kills, waste their abilities, and save your teammates from dying. Self-cast it between fights to heal, and use it to heal teammates, but before you go pulling them around willy-nilly, use your best judgment on whether they really need it. When it comes to getting value out of Rescue Beam, I find that you can get the most out of it by positioning yourself on high ground or using it in combination with your ball. So first, the high ground thing. Having high ground gives you a better view of nearby fights. It often makes you an undesirable target for enemy abilities when your team is lower and closer to them, and it makes you and your Rescue Beam an extremely effective escape for one of your teammates. Your splatter also loses no damage at range, and since that's your primary damage dealer, you might as well be Kobeing that shit from outside the enemy's effective range. Additionally, your cube range is pretty long, so you can sometimes save up to 3 teammates at once by echo cubing 2 of them and rescue beaming a 3rd. Then, for more follow-up, you can drop down on the enemy with ball, stun them, and keep them occupied. Speaking of ball, I've shown a couple clips of it in my previous videos, but you can and should combine Rescue Beam with your ball. Especially if you're already using ball to escape a fight that your team is losing, use it to take another teammate along for the ride. If you position right and use it at the right time, it's almost a guaranteed out for you and a friend. The enemy is just not going to be able to outpace you. I also find that jumping, or double jumping, is helpful when doing the first pull with Rescue Beam as ball. It helps make sure that your allied target doesn't get stuck on map geometry, and it just feels faster to me. I don't know. Alright, on to Echo Shard. Echo Shard is something you should use constantly. Oftentimes, especially nearby to fights, as soon as I use one cube, I'll echo up another just to have it ready. That said, knowing when not to echo, or when to echo splatter instead, is also pretty important. Sometimes you'll just be running down someone with your team and you're not going to need both cubes. With this build, you have a lot of spirit items, so you do pretty good damage with splatter, and echoing it for a double splatter burst is going to be a good chunk of enemy HP. You basically never echo for Puddle Punch, just because its cooldown is so low and you usually have 2 to 3 charges of it. But there are some niche situations where that might be useful, especially during an escape. Something you definitely should be using your punch for is punching allies in cubes, especially when they're in deep with the enemy team. A lot of the time your cubes are going to be near a wall that you can put a punch on, and it can kind of act as a second rescue beam in a lot of situations. And that's basically it. As support Viscous, it's all about knowing what stuff to counter with your cube, and when it's good or bad to cube or rescue beam your allies. You can be a pretty good support Viscous with just that, and a little bit of ball control. But if you want to get a little sillier with it, there's a fourth, secret step. Step 4. Goovement. So a lot of characters have great movement in this game. Lash is probably the top of most people's lists when it comes to movement characters, but you've also got heavy melee canceling with abilities like Abrams's Siphon Life or Paradox's Kinetic Carbine. You can also heavy melee cancel with certain items, and the point is there's a lot of movement for a lot of different characters in Deadlock. And if you've seen my other videos, you probably know that Viscous has a lot more going on movement-wise than how it might first appear. The first layer of that is puddle punch boosting. Now, punch boosting is pretty simple. You put a punch on the wall, it'll knock you away from the wall. If you add a dash or a dash jump, it'll knock you farther and faster. I'm not really going to cover puddle punch boosting or vent boosting or any of the more universal movement techs like wall kicks or various kinds of dashes, because people have already made those videos. Kerosene, spelled K-E-R-O, the number 2 E-N-E, on YouTube put out a pretty in-depth guide on punch boosting and some other viscous movement tech. Similarly, 22 has a great video on ball movement and ball techniques. I'll link both of them in the description, you should go check them out. However, there is something that those videos don't cover, which I learned from the Viscous Discord that I would love to talk about, and that's cube launches. Cube launches are extremely funny, and I love them. So, in order to cube launch, you need a few things. You need a sloped edge, you need to be high enough off the ground, and you need enough space to make the insane distance you get worth it. Because you're going to be in a cube for most of the way, and you can only change your trajectory when you're not in the cube. What this all boils down to is that this tech isn't useful everywhere. There are specific points on the map that are good for it. One of the best places are the bridges where buffs spawn. They're easy to get to, they have great sightlines on mid lane and their respective side lane, and they're very high off the ground. They may not look like they have the sloped edge that we need, but they actually do. In fact, a lot of rooftops on the new map secretly have a sloped edge to them. Let me break down why the slope is important, because it's definitely not self-explanatory. So, Deadlock tracks whether or not you're on a sloped surface, primarily for the purpose of knowing whether or not you should be able to slide at any given time. Usually, that tracking resets as soon as you're not touching a slope anymore. However, the cube never got the memo on that, so cube looks at the slope value, and as long as you haven't touched a flat surface since you were last on a slope, it behaves as though you're still on the slope. This is referred to as cube momentum, or slope storage, and for our purposes, it's useful for generating more acceleration while our cube flies through the air. The other thing cube missed the memo on is actually experiencing air resistance. Any momentum that you have when you enter the cube, you keep until you touch the ground. Another fun fact about slope storage, according to Cube, wall kicks also don't count as touching the ground, so you can double jump and wall kick while retaining slope storage. So now that you understand some of the weirdness behind the cube launch, here's how you actually perform one. First, you place your punch on a corner or wall opposite of the direction you want to go, like so. Then you dash in the direction you want to go so that you pass over the sloped edge. You don't need to dash jump to cube launch, just dashing horizontally once will get you there. Finally, you self-cast cube. Holding the self-cast button and hitting 2 or binding a dedicated quick self-cast button will make it easier to get the timing down. The goal is to have dash momentum and be in the cube at the moment the fist connects with you. But due to slope storage, you want that to happen after you've touched the slope. That makes this sound a lot harder than it actually is. All you really need to do is puddle punch, dash immediately, and cube immediately after that. If you hit all of those things correctly and quickly, you should get a proper cube launch. Normally doing this would drop you in the middle of the enemy wretched and cubeless, but you have Echo Shard, and you can just pop that shit while you sail through the air. So if your allies are dying and you're somewhere in the weird limbo zone between anything important, it might be faster to take a cube express straight to the fight. One of the major downsides to cube launching like this is that you can't use rescue beam while you do it, which other movement options like punch boosting or ball allow you to do. Combining punch boosts, boosting off of vents, and balling around with your rescue beam definitely has a bit of a learning curve, but pulling that off in-game is extremely fun, so I highly recommend practicing those sorts of things in the map exploration mode. Spend some time punch boosting around with fast stamina on. Try to pull off some Tony Hawk stunts, I don't know. It's honestly a lot of fun to do on its own, and just a couple of hours in the practice map will work wonders on your actual game. And that's about all I can offer when it comes to support Viscous advice. I hope this has been helpful to at least some people out there. Again, I have to couch all of this with the fact that I am not high rank. This is just the build that I've had the most fun with playing Deadlock. I used to be a Haze main, if you'd believe that, but I've been fully converted, obviously. I'm in love with this silly little slime guy. And I hope with the power of tutorializing, you can fall in love with him too. But not too many of you, because if the numbers get too high, I might stop getting Viscous 100% of the time. I'd like to thank the Viscous Discord for helping me improve my goo guy a lot in a short amount of time, and I'd like to specifically thank Tripled U from the Discord for helping me with proofreading the segment about cube launch tech, and Magic Carpet for letting me use their art as part of the outro. Oh, and thanks for 1,000 subs. That's wild to me. I started making Deadlock montages purely as a way to learn how to use Adobe Premiere Pro, but people seem to really like them, and I'm still addicted to this game, so I'm gonna keep making them. Anyway, that's it. Good luck, fellow goobers. Go practice medicine.